She said I wasn't welcome at Dad's party, as if I didn't bankroll the entire evening. That was the moment I stopped being surprised by them. My mother's voice still rang in my ears from that morning. "Reagan, don't come tonight. It's Dad's birthday. This dinner isn't for people like you." She didn't even bother to lower her voice. I wasn't a daughter in her eyes anymore. I was an inconvenience. "My name is Reagan Blake. I'm 37. The only daughter from my father's first marriage, the one they never bring up at family dinners. And apparently the one not invited to his birthday either." Now I stood outside the Calder Grand, the hotel I'd built from a shell of a bankrupt spa. My heels sank slightly into the soft red carpet as I looked through the crystal-clear glass. Everything inside, the lighting, the wine list, the imported marble, had passed through my hands. And yet, I wasn't on the guest list. Then came Cassidy, my half-sister. Her smirk appeared before her voice did. "Wow, you actually showed up?" She glanced down at my dress, a custom silk piece from Paris, and let out a short, clipped laugh. "Tonight's for VIPs, you know. Family, not restaurant managers." I could have walked away. I almost did. But I didn't build a multi-million-dollar hospitality company just to flinch when someone underestimated me. I took a slow breath and stepped forward, past her perfume cloud and rehearsed superiority. Then the doors opened, and behind them my head of security appeared, polished, professional, and clearly looking for me. "Miss Blake," he said with a nod. "Chef Dylan's waiting for your final approval before we begin service." Cassidy blinked. Her expression twisted. First confusion, then disbelief. I smiled. "'Cause tonight, I wasn't walking into a party. I was walking into my hotel." Cassidy always acted like she ran the family. She wasn't the oldest. She wasn't even legally a Blake. Her mother married my father after I was already 10. But you wouldn't know that at any of our family gatherings. Her voice was always the loudest. Her stories always the longest. Her dresses always slightly too tight and way too expensive looking to be real. And her insults? Always served with a smile. "You can't just walk in because you feel nostalgic," she said, stepping between me and the lobby like she was protecting national secrets. "We have actual guests here tonight. Important people. People who belong. Important people." As if I hadn't personally signed off on every single guest invitation for this event months ago. My team had coordinated the wine pairing. My florist had flown in those hydrangeas from the Netherlands. And the piano player warming up in the corner? I discovered her at a jazz lounge in Charleston last year. Cassidy didn't know any of that. She was too busy trying to marry up. Her fiancé, Landon, worked in venture capital, one of those guys who wore expensive sneakers with tailored suits and said things like synergy unironically. They'd met at a rooftop fundraiser and gotten engaged 3 weeks later. To her, that meant she had finally arrived. That she was untouchable. "You could have at least worn something better," she muttered now, looking at my outfit again. "This isn't some backyard barbecue." Funny. The dress had been custom-tailored by a Parisian designer who'd refused Cassidy's request just last season. He told me about it during my final fitting, laughing about the girl who begged for the lookbook access and offered exposure instead of a check. I looked her over once, then smiled faintly. I wore what I could afford. Her eyes narrowed, but before she could reply, our mother emerged from the crowd. Elaine Blake was the kind of woman who believed good taste could be inherited, but only if you came from the right mother. Her gaze locked onto me like I was something she'd stepped in. "Reagan, we talked about this." No, they had talked. I'd simply received a text that morning. "Don't come to the Calder Grand tonight. It's not the right crowd for you. Please don't embarrass us." And here she was now, smoothing the fabric of her champagne-colored dress, smiling for the donors in the room, pretending not to see the front desk staff staring at us in awkward silence. "We wanted to keep tonight elegant," she said softly, stepping in close so only I could hear her. Just family and distinguished guests. Cassidy's guests. Landon's colleagues. Bankers. Real people. I blinked. Real people. Like I was a fabrication. A temporary placeholder someone forgot to erase. I almost let that one go. Almost. But then she added, with a sympathetic tilt of her head. It's okay. You tried. And something in me clicked. Not snapped. Not broke. Just locked into place. I stepped back, put on the smile I reserved for board meetings and corporate spies, and replied evenly, That's good to hear. Because tonight, I think it's time I stopped trying. They thought I'd been struggling somewhere in Florida, managing a modest cafe by the beach. Maybe running a failing B&B with spotty Wi-Fi and bad reviews. That's what they told their friends anyway. She wanted to be in hospitality, Mom would say, like it was a personality flaw. But she's happy, I think, Cassidy would add, with that rehearsed smile that always landed just a second too late. The truth? I hadn't just been in hospitality. I'd rebuilt the rules. 10 years ago, I used every dollar from my grandmother's inheritance, money no one else in the family even acknowledged I got, and bought a derelict hotel in Astoria, Oregon, peeling paint, leaking pipes, and a reputation for bedbugs. It was a disaster, but it was mine. I lived on instant noodles for months, learned how to patch drywall from YouTube, and poured every second I wasn't working into learning the business from the inside out. When I couldn't afford a marketing team, I did it myself. When I got stiffed by a contractor, I rolled up my sleeves and finished the job. And when that first hotel turned its first real profit, I didn't throw a party. I bought a second property, a boutique space in New Orleans, then one in Charleston, then Miami. Now, 10 years later, Blake and Wren Hospitality owns and operates 8 properties, 6 boutique hotels, 2 coastal resorts, and 1 fine dining restaurant recently nominated for a Michelin star. And no one in my family had any idea, because I never posted about it, never tagged myself in glossy PR shots, never gave interviews, never boasted. I let them believe what they wanted to believe, that I disappeared, that I wasn't much, that I wasn't one of them. What they didn't realize was that while they were perfecting brunch invitations and country club politics, I was building an empire, quietly, efficiently, and absolutely on my own terms. You know, I said now, glancing back at Cassidy and my mother, this place looks smaller than I remember. Cassidy frowned. You've never been here before. I tilted my head slightly. Haven't I? Her brows pulled together, just a flicker of doubt in her expression. She didn't know that the Calder Grand, the very hotel she stood in now, had been acquired by my holding company just 9 months ago. We kept the old name for legacy branding, but every contract, every license, every employee was under me, under Blake and Wren, under Reagan Blake. Even the chandelier above her head had been selected by me from a catalog in Milan, and yet she still stood there, smug and certain, believing she held the higher ground. That was fine. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for clarity, and the longer I stood among them, the more I realized I'd already won. They just hadn't figured it out yet. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I simply shifted the weight in my heels and walked. Past Cassidy, past my mother, past the years of silence, dismissal, and family gatherings I was never invited to, and into the hotel that bore the fingerprints of everything I had become. The air changed the moment I crossed the threshold. Staff turned subtly toward me. Not in alarm. Not with confusion. With recognition. Lauren, the front desk manager, caught my eye first. Her posture straightened. "Good evening, Miss Blake," she said quickly, glancing past me at the scene unfolding behind. "Your suite is ready. Would you like Chef Dylan to present the menu?" I smiled. Cassidy was still frozen in the doorway, blinking like the lights were too bright. Mom's hand rested on her clutch as if bracing for impact. That won't be necessary, I replied gently. I'll approve it during dinner service. I stepped further inside. The marble I chose in Barcelona last spring gleamed beneath the soft chandelier light. The music was subtle, but perfectly timed to create the illusion of warmth and exclusivity. Everything working exactly the way I designed it. This is ridiculous, Cassidy finally hissed, catching up behind me. You're not on the list. You can't just what? I turned to her, voice even. You're not. She gestured broadly at the space around us, flustered. Not supposed to be here? I finished for her. She fell silent. It's okay, I added almost kindly. Most people don't recognize ownership when it's not worn on a name tag. That was when Landon arrived. Perfectly timed. Pressed suit, loosened tie. Just enough to look like he'd been networking, not just drinking. He saw me. Then saw Cassidy's face. Then mine again. Reagan? He asked. Like my name had just clicked into a much larger puzzle. Cassidy jumped in. She's not invited. She just walked in. Landon's eyes shifted slightly, calculating. Wait, are you Reagan Blake from Blake and Wren? Cassidy went still beside him. I tilted my head. Yes. You're the one who owns. He glanced around. This property? Among others, I said simply. I watched as understanding landed in his eyes like a well-timed checkmate. We've been trying to reach someone from your executive team about the Miami expansion, he said carefully. Our firm. I know, I said, cutting him off. I read your proposal. Cassidy looked like she just swallowed a lemon whole. And for the first time in a very long time I felt still. Not angry. Not vengeful. Just grounded. Because there's a kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout or beg or demand to be seen. It simply walks into the room. And the room changes. I watched Landon step back, just slightly, as if giving me space would protect him from the fact that I now held the strings he thought he controlled. His firm had submitted a proposal for funding through my investment group 3 weeks ago. I'd reviewed it with mild interest until I saw Cassidy's name attached in one of the email threads. That's when I paused. It wasn't personal. Until they made it personal. Cassidy stared at him. You knew that she was someone? I didn't know she was that Reagan Blake, he muttered. And what does that mean exactly? She snapped, her voice shrill. He didn't answer. Because the answer was obvious. I was the one with leverage. I was the one who could sign the deal or shred it. That's when my mother appeared beside them again. Elaine Blake. Elegant as always, layered in gold and silence. Reagan, she said slowly, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Now she wanted to be reasonable. Now that heads were turning. Now that the whispers were growing in volume behind flutes of champagne and clinking forks. I raised one eyebrow. What exactly do you think I misunderstood? This evening, it's your father's birthday. We didn't want distractions. She said the last word like I was a paparazzi or a public scandal. You mean me, I said plainly. You didn't want me here. Her silence was answer enough. Cassidy crossed her arms. If you were going to make a scene, why not just buy your own venue? I laughed softly. Cassidy, I already did. Her face twitched. I stepped closer, not threatening but firm. You're standing in a space I own, breathing air conditioned by my system, eating from a menu I signed off on. The wine was imported under my license. The marble under your heels was hand-selected by me in Milan. I paused, just enough to let her breathe in that truth. I didn't have to crash this party. You crashed mine. For a moment, no one said anything. Then behind me, I heard it, Rachel, my general manager, speaking quietly to a waiter. Let the kitchen know Ms. Blake's arrived. Adjust the service timing. Subtle. Professional. Efficient. Just like I trained her. Reagan, my mother said again, this time softer. You didn't tell us any of this. You never asked, I replied. But why? I looked at her. Not with anger. Just realization. Because you only care about power once it's visible. I didn't need to prove anything to you. I just needed to prove it to myself. And tonight that proof stood all around us. In glass. In gold. In silence. They thought they were hosting a birthday party. But they were standing in the lobby of everything I had built. The music softened as the pianist transitioned to a slower tune. The kind reserved for champagne toasts and polite clapping. But there was no toasting happening now. Only tension. Across the room, I saw Mr. Harrison from Hawthorne Bank speaking with Thomas Anderson from the Anderson Legal Group, two of my father's most prized contacts. Their conversations slowed the moment they noticed me. They didn't recognize me yet, but they recognized the shift. Mr. Harrison stepped forward first, smiling in the vague way powerful men do when they sense something important happening and don't want to be left out of it. "Excuse me," he said, brushing past Cassidy. "I couldn't help overhearing. Did you say you're Reagan Blake?" "As in Blake and Wren Hospitality." I turned to face him. "I did." He blinked. "My team's been trying to get a meeting with your office for months. Your assistant said your schedule was full until next quarter." "It still is," I said without apology. "But I'm here tonight as family, not business." Thomas Anderson joined us then, his expression already shifting from confusion to clarity. "Your father. Robert Blake is your father." He looked between me and the man standing at the center of the dining room, unaware of the small earthquake happening at the front. "And you're the CEO behind the Azure Property Acquisitions?" I nodded once. "We thought it was an anonymous investment group," Anderson said quietly, almost to himself. "We've been trying to negotiate those lease terms for months." My mother turned pale. Cassidy looked like she might actually sit down. "This is insane," she muttered. "You can't just walk in and pretend to be." "Pretend?" I turned to her. "I've built a portfolio worth more than the combined annual revenue of everyone in this room." I wasn't bragging. I was stating fact. You've all been trying to get to me without knowing I was the one holding the pen. Behind me, I heard the elevator ding. Rachel appeared again. "Miss Blake," she said respectfully, "your father's cake has arrived. Would you like to present it personally?" The silence was almost painful. I looked toward the dining room, where my father finally stood, surrounded by guests, unaware of the unfolding drama. Or maybe not unaware, just unwilling to look. I took a breath. "Yes," I said to Rachel. "Let's begin." I walked past my family, my mother silent, Cassidy frozen, and through the grand doors into the main dining hall. As I entered, heads turned. The pianist slowed again. Servers stopped mid-pour. And then, like a cue only I could hear, someone at the far end of the table murmured, "Isn't that the owner of the hotel?" That ripple moved faster than anything Cassidy could have controlled. And for the first time in a decade, they all saw me. Not as the daughter who left. Not as the girl with the hospitality dream. But as the woman who owned the building they were dining in. My father looked up as I approached, confusion flickering in his eyes before shifting to surprise. "Reagan," he said, as if I were a ghost materializing at the head of his party. The dining room had gone silent. Forks hovered midair. Conversations died. I paused beside his chair. "Happy birthday," I said simply. He glanced around, clearly trying to make sense of the sudden shift in the room's energy. "I didn't know you were coming," he said, his voice guarded. "I wasn't invited." A few guests shifted in their seats. "That must have been a mistake," he said, though the words didn't sound like his own. "Was it?" I asked, lowering the envelope in my hand gently onto the table. "That's for you." He picked it up slowly, opening the flap with hesitant fingers. Inside was the deed to a private villa in Lake Como, one of my most exclusive holdings. Fully furnished. Staffed. Paid in full. "What is this?" he asked, voice flat. "A birthday gift," I replied. "From the daughter you didn't think could afford dinner." For a long moment, no one said a word. Then Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and leaned forward slightly. "Robert," he said to my father, "why didn't you ever mention your daughter was the Reagan Blake? You know we've been trying to secure that commercial loan for months." I saw the muscles in my father's jaw tighten. Thomas Anderson jumped in next. "And our firm's still waiting on the lease agreement for the West 72nd property. I assume that's under her portfolio too." Heads turned. Whispers grew louder. My father looked at me again, this time with something else behind his eyes. Not confusion, not annoyance, fear. "You own all of this?" he asked quietly. "Yes. Why didn't you ever tell us?" I stared at him. "Because the last time I told you I wanted to do something outside the family firm, you called me a glorified waitress." He winced. I didn't. I stayed standing, calm, collected. And after that, no one ever asked again. You just assumed I failed because I wasn't asking for help. My mother had entered the room by now, pale as the linens on the table. Cassidy followed close behind, but kept her distance. "You've been running this place?" my father asked, his voice almost a whisper. "I own this place, and 7 others. A long pause. "Reagan," he began, but I held up my hand. "Don't. This isn't about apology. I didn't come here for that. I came to stop hiding my success just to spare your pride." The entire room had turned toward us now. The birthday party, the grand celebration of my father's legacy, had become a stage for mine, and I wasn't stepping off it. I sat down at the table, not because anyone invited me to, but because it was my table. The moment I did, the tension broke like glass under pressure. Servers resumed their movements, more alert now. Wine was poured more carefully. Plates were set down with steadier hands. The pianist switched to a smoother, more reverent melody, like even the music knew something had changed. My father hadn't touched the envelope. Cassidy stood stiff behind him, like a child forced to stay at a party she no longer wanted to attend. Then slowly it began. The shift. People started approaching me. Not all at once, but in carefully timed intervals. A polite compliment here. A gentle business inquiry there. "Your approach to modern luxury is fascinating," said one guest. "I had no idea you were in hospitality," another chimed in. "We'd love to talk branding collaborations if your team's open," a woman whispered, sliding me her card. I wasn't rude. I nodded. I smiled. I placed each card in my clutch without a word. But I didn't thank anyone. I didn't need their approval anymore. And yet, the one person who hadn't said anything, who hadn't even looked at me, was my mother. Elaine sat 2 seats away, her posture pristine, her lips tight, her fork untouched. I wondered what she was thinking, whether she was regretting the things she said this morning, or the last 10 years. I almost didn't care. But then she leaned in slightly and whispered, "You could have told us." I turned my head to meet her gaze. "And what would you have done with that information? Boasted about it to your friends? Claimed you helped me get there?" She flinched. I kept my voice low but firm. "You didn't believe in me when I had nothing. You didn't even want me here tonight. Don't rewrite that now." She blinked, then said softly, "I always knew you had potential." I smiled, the kind that says too late without needing to. "No, you knew I had ambition, but you never thought it would turn into anything real." She opened her mouth, but I stopped her with a slight shake of the head. "It's okay. Really. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just not asking for space in your world." I leaned back in my chair. "Because I've already built my own." Around us, laughter returned to the party. The lights felt warmer again. Someone proposed a toast. But everything had changed. My family didn't know where to sit anymore. Because for the first time, I wasn't on the outside. They were. The rest of the evening played out like a strange dream. People clinked glasses. Conversations floated around me, but none of it felt real. I watched Cassidy sit in silence, barely touching her plate. Landon had disappeared entirely, most likely on the phone. frantically reassessing his engagement contract. And my mother? She wore that frozen expression she saved for social failure, the one she used to wear when the country club ran out of rose. But it was my father who kept stealing glances my way, his birthday crown of attention slowly slipping off. He didn't speak for the rest of the dinner. Not until I stepped out onto the private terrace overlooking the skyline just to breathe. He followed a few minutes later, his footsteps careful, hesitant. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. "You've done well," he said finally, standing beside me without meeting my eyes. I let the silence answer first. Then, "Thank you." We stood there for a moment, just the two of us in the city below. "I always thought you were being impulsive," he continued, "walking away from the firm, from something stable, something ours." "You mean yours," I said softly. He nodded. "Maybe. But I didn't think you had it in you to do all this." I looked over at him. "You didn't even think I had it in me to manage a staff of 10, let alone a corporation." I was wrong. The words fell heavy between us. Honest. Undeniable. He turned to me then, really turned, and for the first time all night, I saw not just confusion or regret, but age. He looked older than I remembered. Tired. A little smaller. "Can you forgive us?" he asked. I studied him. The man who had once slammed a door when I mentioned hospitality school. Who hadn't called in over 2 years. Who sat at a table tonight, celebrating a legacy, while erasing mine. "Forgiveness isn't the issue," I said slowly. "Respect is." He didn't interrupt. "You didn't believe in me until everyone else did. Until my name came with a portfolio. Until I made your guests sit up straighter." "That's not true," he said quietly. "Isn't it?" A long breath passed between us. "I'm proud of you, Reagan." It should have felt good. I think part of me wanted it to. But pride, after the fact, tastes different. Like warm champagne, too late to chill, too flat to matter. "I'm proud of me too," I said. "But I didn't come tonight for your approval." "Then why did you come?" I looked at him. "Because I wanted to walk through that door and no longer flinch when they told me I didn't belong. I needed to see if I could do that without needing you to clap." He looked down. Then nodded slowly. "You did more than walk through the door," he said. "You built the damn house. And for the first time in years." We stood on level ground. I didn't go back inside right away. I stayed on the terrace, letting the city breathe with me. The air was cool, almost kind. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from silence, but from peace. Behind me, the celebration continued. But it didn't feel like mine. And it didn't have to. For years, I thought closure would look like applause. Like validation. Like someone finally saying you were right. But it didn't. It looked like standing on the 42nd floor of a hotel I owned, watching the skyline blink like a slow exhale and realizing I no longer needed them to see me. Because I saw me. I turned eventually and walked back inside. Not because I had anything to prove, but because it was time to leave on my own terms. As I crossed the lobby, I passed Rachel, who gave me a soft nod. She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't need to. A few guests murmured my name as I passed. A few smiled too widely. The Blackwoods tried to stop me near the elevator, something about a membership request for the Aspen property. I gave them my assistant's card and kept walking. Cassidy stood near the main doors. Arms folded, face unreadable. "You really planned all this?" she asked. "No," I said, but I didn't stop it either. She looked down at her shoes. "You made us look stupid." "No," I replied gently. "You did that all by yourselves." I smiled, not cruelly, just honestly. Then I stepped outside. The air hit differently now. Like I'd just closed a chapter that had been sitting open far too long. A black town car pulled up to the curb. The same one I arrived in earlier, but this time I didn't feel like someone trying to crash a party. I felt like someone leaving after hosting it. As the driver opened the door, I paused one last time, glancing back at the building. The Calder Grand shimmered behind me, regal and ageless. Still standing. Still beautiful. Still mine. I didn't wave goodbye. Didn't wait for applause. I just got in the car and shut the door. And in that stillness, I realized something. All those years I spent chasing a seat at their table. I'd forgotten I was the one who built the room. Sometimes people won't believe in you until it's too late to matter. And that's okay. You don't have to prove anything to people who only show up when you've already won. What matters is that you keep going, that you build quietly, learn boldly, and show up for yourself long before anyone else does. Because one day you'll walk into a room you once felt too small for, and realize you're the one who owns the keys.